Thanks.
And the International Monetary Fund has advice for fixing the U.S. economy, calling on the U.S. to immediately end the sequestration cuts, raise the debt ceiling, and throw in the IMF support to President Obama's budget plan. IMF also revising its outlook for the U.S. growth in 2014 down to 2.7% from 3%. Our Liz Clayman is live in Washington with an exclusive interview with IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde. Take it, Liz.
Thank you, Dennis. We are here at the International Monetary Fund headquarters in Washington, D.C. with the latest IMF report specifically on the United States, its recovery, its growth, and any kind of upside or downside risks that the IMF sees. In a Fox Business exclusive, we are here with Madame Christine Lagarde, who is, of course, the Managing Director of the IMF. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Well, in this report, I see a bunch of optimistic revelations, but also some very pointed observations about everything involving the Fed, the sequestration, our growth. So let's start first with the U.S. recovery specifically. You say in the report that the nature of it is changing. Why, and what do you mean by that?
We believe that there is recovery, and that recovery is much more stable and durable than we had seen before. We forecast the U.S. economy at 1.9 in 2013. And we believe that because of the housing market's significant improvement in particular, there will be a more durable recovery. Yet, it could be better. And clearly the unemployment numbers are not where they should be. They should be lower than that. And we see the fiscal policy, the deficit cutting, as being too harsh on the economy at the moment.
Let me get to that unemployment rate. Right now, about 7.6%.
Right.
It just ticked up from April to May. You say it should be lower right now. What rate would you have expected it to be at, being realistic, for this moment in time?
No, what I'm saying is that, you know, when the U.S. economy is working at full potential, if you will, unemployment should be lower than that, which is why we are saying that while the recovery is underway, it has to continue, it has to be persistent in order to effectively have a dent on unemployment.
Which brings me to growth in 2014, and while you do say we'll see 2.7% better than 2013, you downgraded that. The earlier IMF expectation was 3%.
Correct.
Why the pullback of a couple of tenths of a percentage point?
When we forecasted 3%, we had assumed that sequestration will gradually be removed and reformatted more intelligently. All right?
And we haven't seen that yet.
And we haven't seen that, and we fear that we're not going to see it in the near term, which is why we believe that sequestration will actually impact growth in the United States in 2014, which is why we downgraded slightly from 3% to 2.7%, which is a lot more than this year.
The word that you used, and folks, I want you to understand that the wording is important here. In this IMF report, you specifically say repeal the sequester. It was, quote, excessively rapid and ill-designed. It exerts a heavy toll on growth in the short term. And then you went on to say that it should be replaced with a backloaded mix of entitlement savings and new revenues. We have, at least in the United States, in a way, felt like we dodged a bullet, that the sequester wasn't as bad as everybody thought, and yet you're worried enough. Is there some other leg you see downward on this, another shoe to drop with sequester in the second half of this year?
I think a lot of people thought that sequestration was ill-designed, and I think it was put in place precisely to be avoided. So what we're saying now is slow down, but hurry up. What do I mean? Slow down. There's no need to contract the deficit by 2.5%. It's very heavy on growth, and it really impacts by about 1.5%, maybe a little bit more, particularly if it picks up in the second quarter of 2013. We're also saying hurry up because there are long-term measures that will be critical for the U.S. economy that need to be taken now, particularly concerning entitlement.
Let me get to housing, because you say the one thing you worry about, because you just heard Madame Lagarde, she was very, very upbeat about U.S. housing, saying it's recovering, but you say beware of weakening loan standards. Now, this brings me to the Federal Reserve. The Fed, of course, has been pumping a lot of liquidity into the system, a lot of air into the system in the form of very low interest rates, and of course this massive bond buying purchase, tapering. Everybody's wondering when that will happen. You say it'll extend through at least the end of this year. When do you see tapering begin? You say you have met with the Federal Reserve and Treasury.
For our statement that you've just indicated to the audience, we have to make assumptions. And our assumptions are that there will be a continuation of that quantitative easing of the Fed until the end of 2013. We believe it was appropriate, it's been very helpful, and we hope that it continues until the end of 2013.
How about
given
through
the circumstances.
2014?
2014, depending on circumstances, and particularly if unemployment improves and if inflation is, slightly heading up a little bit, then hopefully the monetary policy that has been put in place will gradually unwind over time with good communication.
We have so much more to speak with Madame Lagarde about, and guess what? This conversation continues at 3 p.m. Eastern on Countdown to the Closing Bell. We'll talk about the Eurozone, any other Cyprus disasters coming around the corner, so much more to discuss, and more on the Federal Reserve, when the tapering begins, and how graceful and delicate it really has to be. She's got some pointed thoughts on that. And Dennis, you made the point at the top of the show about how the economic numbers in the U.S. actually look pretty good. Therein lies the Fed's conundrum. When they do start to tighten rates, will our U.S. financials hold up? I will ask Christine Lagarde that very question. It's a Fox Business exclusive. We'll see you for a whole fresh new part of the interview, 3 p.m. Eastern on Countdown to the Closing Bell. Back to you in New York.
All right.